Hi, welcome to the bathtub. This is the master bather. I've been master bathing morning, noon, and night to bring you the greatest in master bathing literature. I'm going to stop using that joke. This is a terrible day. The world is run by a complete fucking maniacs, and we have the worst of them. And they just there's this is the pre-apocalyptic edition of the bathtub, and we're hoping that it doesn't become the post-apocalyptic episode of the bathtub. But on a day like this, Iran has just bombed some American installations in Iraq, and that idiot has made a mess of everything, and it was a mess made by the previous idiots. And we're not supposed to talk politics here. So we're going to talk about something completely different, which is Joan Didion, the new Library of America edition of Didion's work. My dog is, I'm so depressed about today that we're letting Lucky just run rampant through the whole house, all through the talk. You can't come up here because you're too crazy. But we're going to talk about this Didion thing by the... I'm going to put you down unless you go away. Okay. We're going to do the... Lucky. Okay, come on. Up. While we wait for the bombs to come, Lucky can sit here for a few minutes, and then I'm going to put her outside. So this is the California... We'll call this the California Dreaming episode. And Didion is one of the few people who is... one of the few living Americans who has had a volume of her work published by the Library of America. It's very prestigious. They have lovely editions. They're very tissue papery thin, so it's kind of hard turning the pages. And they put a lot. It's like 900 pages in each volume. It's going to be really a good episode. And she seems to think that when we do these, that it's time for her to wrestle me. So this one is the first one. So this is the 60s and the 70s edition. I'm going to put a link to an essay I did for the Los Angeles Review of Books, which is going to give you all basically my main thoughts when I wasn't thinking about the world coming to an end, even as we were speaking. So, what are we talking about? We got a writer who I have mixed feelings about, but who I've liked quite a bit at different parts of my life. And rereading her, I still find her quite an interesting writer and a good writer and an intelligent writer. She writes very good sentences and paragraphs. That's what I quite like about Didion. And she wrote, there's three, this does the 60s, so it is her first three novels, which is a kind of Run River, which is a bit Steinbeckian novel, which is about kind of a married couple in Sacramento, which is where Didion comes from. I'll write in the essay that's attached to this talk today that when I was young, I didn't know many writers who were Californian, because everyone, and even today, everyone has to be from New York. They're kind of East Coasters, or they're, it's like being in England. Everyone's from London or from kind of well-off families in the center, in the home counties, but they all went to Oxbridge. In America, most of them seem to be East Coast. So there weren't many California writers, and I thought I was interested in Didion from a young age because she was one of the few writers who sort of wrote about California as a Californian. She's quite conservative. I think she was basically a sorority girl, a very wealthy sorority girl, went to Berkeley, and lucky. And she wrote those three novels. Run Rivers is kind of an interesting novel. I hadn't read it before, but I enjoyed it this time. And I also always sort of liked her second book, Play It As It Lays, despite some of the obvious weaknesses of the book. It's about a friend of mine calls it kind of phony existentialism, and there is a bit of that in it. It's about a kind of a second-rung movie actress who's on a divorce and she's drinking and too many drugs, and she goes through depression, and she's kind of aimless, and she wanders through the book. It's basically about her wandering through life and not being very happy. But there's some really good writing in it, and really good prose about living in Los Angeles. I sort of think about Play It As It Lays as sort of a fairly honest take at a certain type of, intellectually bereft Southern California life. People who feel a little lost in this weird, Southern California is a weird place to live, particularly in the 70s when I lived there and when Didion was living there. And it's still fairly honest. And I always think of it as kind of the beginning of, I've never been able to read Bret Easton Ellis. And Bret Easton Ellis, it's kind of hard to read any Bret Easton Ellis novel, particularly those early ones, without seeing him take this sort of Didion character to extremes. So they're always, this serial killers, and they're, doing horrible things to people, and there's these shut down kids watching it all happen. It's sort of Didion, gothic Didion. But Didion is still quite worth reading, and Play It As It Lays, I still like. A Book of Common Prayer is sort of her version of a Conrad novel. She's trying to write about a kind of Central American political situation, and she takes it from a fairly personal the life of a woman living there, an American woman being observed by a local woman. And it's okay. It's a little confusing. There's some great passages of writing. I think basically Didion can really write good paragraphs. Almost every one of her paragraphs is really good. What Didion's best known for is the essays. She did film work. She did a lot of film work. Most of she did like one of the versions of, she did that silly Chris Christopherson, what's her name? The Chris Christopherson version of A Star Is Born. And she's did some other films with her husband, John Gregory Dunn. But her best stuff was the essays. She wrote a lot of essays, a lot of journalism for some of the magazines. She went on to do a lot for the New Yorker, as I recall. But this covers some of the early stuff. And she was one of the first writers who kind of would write about, with a kind of an affection for most of the Southern California life that I knew. Living in San Bernardino, John Wayne. She and I both have an affection for John Wayne. For me, it's a bit of a guilty affection. And she wrote a book called The White Album, and one called Slouching Towards Bethlehem, which I reread this. I felt the same way now I felt about it when I was young. Slouching Towards Bethlehem, the title essays from a famous poem by Yeats. And Slouching Toward Bethlehem is this creature that's shambling towards basically the apocalypse. It's Donald Trump, basically. Donald Trump, this monster wandering through this landscape. That's, Trump didn't destroy our fucking country. He just came along after we'd done a good job screwing it up ourselves. And that kind of monster. And she uses that image to talk about San Francisco in the 60s. When there's a lot of kind of, lost kids, runaway kids, people trying to create alternative communities, a lot of good and a lot of bad in San Francisco. I think the essay shows that she really didn't get it. And I think that politically, I think Didion was very, very much, she always shows up as a kind of a conservative girl who just doesn't understand who these kids are that, they didn't go to good schools. But at the same time, she writes very well. She's got a great ear for dialogue, so she goes around and meets people, and she always has these wonderful little quotes that she gets from people when she meets them. And I'm not as big on her serious essays as I am on some of the kind of more personal and slighter essays, which I think she starts to go back to in her late life. And we'll probably do another Didion soon. Anyway, I'll read one paragraph. This is from page 339. Then I'm going to go because the world's coming to an end and my dog's driving me crazy. This is called On Going Home, and it's about going back to her family. And it says, I am home for my daughter's first birthday. By home, I do not mean the house in Los Angeles where my husband and I and the baby live, but the place where my family is in the Central Valley of California. I mean, when I was a kid, someone even writing about Sacramento was sort of romantic to me, if they actually knew where Sacramento was. It is a vital, although troublesome distinction. My husband likes my family, but is uneasy in their house, because once there, I fall into their ways, which are difficult, oblique, deliberately inarticulate, not my husband's ways. We live in dusty houses. D-U-S-T, he once wrote with his finger on surfaces all over the house, but no one noticed it. Filled with mementos quite without value to him. What could the Canton dessert plates mean to him? How could he have known about the assay scales? Why should he care if he did know? And we appear to talk exclusively about people we know who have been committed to mental hospitals, about people we know who have been booked on drunk driving charges, and about property, particularly about property, land, price per acre, and C2 zoning and assessments and freeway access. My brother does not understand my husband's inability to perceive the advantage in the rather common real estate transaction known as sale-leaseback, And my husband, in turn, does not understand why so many of the people he hears about in my father's house have recently been committed to mental hospitals or booked on drunk driving charges. Nor does he understand that when we talk about sale-leasebacks and right-of-way condemnations, we are talking in code about the things we like best: the yellow fields and the cottonwoods and the rivers rising and falling and the mountain roads closing when the heavy snow comes in. We miss each other's points, have another drink, and regard the fire. My brother refers to my husband in his presence as Joan's husband. Marriage is the classic betrayal. That's a wonderful paragraph. I won't say much more than the sense that she in these kind of large, thick paragraphs, has so many details, such a great sense of the rhythm of her sentences. When she brings in the quotes from what people say, they just sound like they're characters. She always gets those lovely little moments. And then when she comes over that, she always comes to that lovely closing line to a paragraph: marriage is the classic betrayal, where suddenly all this information about her going home and her husband being a bit unhappy about being there becomes something bigger, which is that when we marry, we betray our family. And in some ways, we betray the person we marry. It's a really lovely idea, and it's just really well put together. She writes a lot of paragraphs like that. And she's definitely worth reading. Again, I have mixed feelings about her, but this is kind of a really nice edition. I have mixed feelings about sometimes these editions because they're kind of hard to read, but this is a nice compact one, has all the individual books set up as individual books in there, and it kind of takes up less space than all the original paperbacks, which I was able to get rid of. Okay, so let's hope we survive to do some more bathing and reading books, and maybe we'll look back on this and say, well, gee, we survived that one. Maybe we'll survive the next one. And happy bathing. Go out and have a really good day. I'm going to smoke a joint and have a beer. So that's my plan for the evening, and we'll come back. I'll try to do some more of these very soon, as soon as I get over the depression of what a mess this world is. Hang in there, Australia. We're thinking of you. We're thinking about all over the world. Hang in there. Okay, happy bathing from the Master Bather. I'm going to go master bathe right now. Okay, bye.